I love Project Zomboid. It's been in early access since 2013. Updates are few and far between, often with lengthy 2 or 3 year-long gaps between sizable content added to the game. In its place stands a robust modding community, one of the best of any game on Steam, and I'll argue that until I'm red in the face. And a communicative and reliably stubborn yet small development team at the Indie Stone who refuse to crunch and follow the mantra that good things come to those who wait. Build 42 is on the horizon, which appears to be an enormous update with an engine overhaul, the introduction of NPC animals, and new basements and skyscrapers. I look forward to defending my cows against the zombie horde until the end of time. The anticipation I have for this update is like nothing else. It's not like waiting for a new game, which might turn out to be a complete and utter failure, which we should have seen coming with the day before, but I already know what Project Zomboid is. I've already spent several hundred hours in the game, and regardless of whether the update meets my expectations or not, I'm likely to spend several hundred more, even still. Last year's greatest success story, Game of the Year winner Baldur's Gate 3, spent 3 years in early access. During this time, the game was changed and tweaked with feedback from a dedicated community. It was released when it was ready, and according to many developers we talked to at Gamescom 2023 and beyond, the success of Baldur's Gate 3 only cemented how important early access is to releasing a fully fledged game. If you keep your dedicated community happy, they'll return the favor by trial and erroring your game all the way to greatness. Enshrouded, one of my favorite games of 2024 so far, launched to a positive reception, but was ultimately overshadowed by Palworld. Despite this, and after chatting with the team at Keen Games last year at Gamescom, I see Enshrouded as a perfect blank canvas for future updates. It's clear this is a long-term project, and that early access is only the start. They've put out polls on their forums that let players vote on the most requested features for future updates. In a presentation and co-op session for the game Nightingale, Inflection Games CEO Aaron Flynn said that developing games in early access is exciting. There's nothing like it, and that this is the modern way to develop games. Early access allows developers to hear what their players want directly. It's a fine balancing act, of course, because despite what the players might say they want, they're not always right. A lot of the time they are, but not always. Nightingale launched into early access with a lower price point than its full 1.0 release, which should be the norm going forward for a lot of games like it. Many other popular games spent long periods in early access, including Slay the Spire, Subnautica, Ark, Prison Architect, and Darkest Dungeon, just to name a few. But for all the winners, there's also losers. Many games have wallowed and eventually died in early access. I'm gonna mention Valheim here, but even I can admit I'm being a little harsh. The game is far from dead, with the highly anticipated Ashlands update hopefully just on the horizon. But there's no denying that player expectation for the promised content roadmap launched with the game have been slashed to pieces. There are also the classic early access failures, like Space-Based DF9, a space simulator developed by Double Fine that completely collapsed in early access almost a decade ago. It was unplayable at launch and just basically never fixed. We haven't seen anything fail quite as spectacularly as that for some time, but never say never. It's growing more and more likely we'll instead see way more success stories in the coming years, with even AAA studios opting for the early access route like Larian Games did for Baldur's Gate 3. There's always going to be a push and pull from gamers. Many of us want a full game for the price of a full game, and that's completely understandable. But many of us also want developers to change and update their product according to what we want. Early access can provide that perfect middle ground, but it has to be handled properly. Games like Suicide Squad show us that early access isn't always the best course of action. But with such success stories like Baldur's Gate 3, it's hard to imagine that this practice is going to get abandoned anytime soon. So for those of us who are still waving our pitchforks and torches at the mention of early access, let's temper that rage just a little bit, because it can't always be a bad thing, right?